My husband claimed he was only fixing a shower head, but underneath my best friend's sink, I found the truth glittering in the dust. Our 5-year anniversary ring lay there, slick with the same sandalwood soap he uses. He believes his millions can buy silence. Yet, as I pocketed that cold band of platinum, he didn't realize he had just started a war with a woman who has absolutely nothing left to lose. My name is Elena Vance, and at 29 years old, I thought I understood the architecture of my marriage perfectly. I stood in the hallway of the apartment complex, holding a paper bag greasy with the bottom of takeout containers. When Harper finally opened the door, the rush of humid, hot air that escaped her apartment practically slapped me in the face. Her hair was soaking wet, clinging to her neck in dark, heavy ropes, and her eyes were darting around the room like she had just witnessed a car crash. I wasn't expecting you," Harper stammered, pulling her robe tighter around her throat. "I brought dumplings," I said, forcing a smile that felt too tight on my face. "Since you said you were feeling under the weather." My husband, Julian Sterling, the esteemed CEO of Sterling Bio, had arrived home an hour ago. He had kissed my cheek and told me he had stopped by Harper's place to fix her leaking shower head because he was just that kind of guy, a billionaire who still knew how to use a wrench. It was a charming story. "I just need to use the restroom," I said, stepping past her before she could block me. The bathroom was a sauna. The mirror was completely fogged over, but the visual cues were secondary to the smell. It hit me instantly. It was not the cheap vanilla and lavender body wash Harper bought in bulk. The air was thick with the scent of aged sandalwood and black pepper. It was Julian's scent. It was a custom blend imported from Italy that cost $300 a bottle. I walked to the sink. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for a hand towel and deliberately knocked a plastic bottle of shampoo off the counter. It clattered loudly against the tile. "Oops," I called out. I crouched down to retrieve it. That was when I saw it, tucked far back under the floating vanity, wedged between the wall and the drain pipe. Something metallic caught the harsh light of the vanity bulbs. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold, wet dust. I pulled it out. It was a platinum band. Heavy, solid. I turned it over in my palm. Inside, the inscription was clear, J and E. Forever. The room seemed to tilt. Just this morning, Julian had taken the ring off his finger at breakfast. "I'm sending this in for a polish and resizing, honey," he had said, his voice smooth as silk. "It's feeling a little loose." The contrast between his polished lie and the cold, hard metal in my hand made me nauseous. He had not been at the jeweler. He had been here, and he had taken it off to shower. I heard Harper's footsteps approaching the door. Instinct took over. I shoved the ring deep into the pocket of my jeans and stood up, gripping the shampoo bottle. When I opened the door, I was calm. My face was a mask of indifference, even though my insides were screaming. Harper was standing in the kitchen now, clutching her elbows. She did not look like a woman basking in the afterglow of an affair. She looked terrified. Her skin was pale, and she flinched when I set the takeout bag on the counter. "Are you okay, Harper?" I asked, testing the waters. I just have a migraine," she whispered, avoiding my eyes. "Please, I just need to sleep." She looked like a hostage, not a lover. That detail snagged in my brain, sharp and uncomfortable, but I pushed it down. I left her apartment with the dumplings still on the counter and the ring burning a hole in my pocket. I returned to our penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Julian was sitting on the Italian leather sofa, reading a tablet. He looked up and smiled, the picture of domestic perfection. "How is she?" he asked, his voice dripping with faux concern. "She's fine," I lied. "Just tired." I watched him for the rest of the evening. I watched him pour wine. I watched him laugh at a show on television. I watched the man I had loved for 5 years perform the role of a husband while wearing the skin of a liar. That night, at 3 in the morning, I slipped out of bed in the sanctuary of the guest bathroom. I locked the door. I placed the ring on the marble counter and took 4 high-resolution photos of it. I uploaded them immediately to a secure cloud server, burying them inside a folder labeled Old Tax Documents. I crept back into the master bedroom. Julian was asleep, his breathing deep and rhythmic. He looked innocent. He looked safe. He thought he was sleeping next to Elena, the soft-spoken interior designer who enjoyed charity galas and trusted her husband implicitly. He was wrong. I stared at his sleeping face, and I felt something snap inside my chest. It was not a break. It was a realignment. The naive girl was gone. In her place stood the granddaughter of a coal miner, a woman with the blood of the Appalachians in her veins. We do not break when the pressure rises. We turn into diamonds. Or we start fires. Julian Sterling had just handed me the match. The open-plan office of Arcos Design usually felt like a sanctuary of clean lines and neutral tones. But that morning, the walls seemed to be closing in on me. I sat at my desk, staring blindly at a layout for a client's living room, while my mind replayed the image of that platinum ring sitting in the dust under Harper's sink. I was trying to maintain the facade of the diligent interior designer, but my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my stylus. My phone buzzed against the glass desktop. It was Julian. Elena. "Did you move the ring box from the nightstand?" His voice came through the speaker, smooth and laced with a manufactured confusion. I could have sworn I left it there before I left for work. I wanted to take it to the jeweler today. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. Yesterday, he said he had already sent it. Today, the narrative had shifted. He was rewriting reality in real time. "You told me yesterday you had already sent it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "No, honey." "I said I planned to," he replied, his tone dropping into a pitying register. "Baby, are you feeling okay? You have been so scatty lately. Honestly, it scares me a little. It reminds me of... well, never mind." "Reminds you of what?" I asked, though I knew exactly where he was aiming. "Your mother," he said softly. "The early onset dementia. It started with memory lapses just like this. Maybe we should schedule a scan for you, just to be safe." The mention of my mother was a calculated strike. He knew her illness was my deepest fear. I hung up, feeling a cold sweat prickle at my hairline. I immediately logged into our joint bank account. I needed to see if there were other secrets. It took me 5 minutes to find it. A transfer made yesterday for $70,000 to a vendor named Blue Horizon Consulting. I called him back. "Julian, what is Blue Horizon? There is a withdrawal for $70,000. "Oh, that." He laughed effortlessly. "It is for the roof repairs on the investment property in Jersey. I told you about that last week. See, you are forgetting things again." I hung up and typed the address of Blue Horizon into a satellite map service. It was not a roofing company. It was an empty lot full of weeds and rusted shipping containers in an industrial park. When I got home that evening, the air in the penthouse felt pressurized. Julian met me at the door, not with a kiss, but with an outstretched hand. "Give me your phone, Elle," he said. "The IT guys at Sterling found a security breach in our home network. I need to run a patch and update your security software. It will only take an hour." He was not updating security. He was installing spyware. I knew it, but I unlocked the device and handed it over. To refuse would be to show my cards. "Thank you, darling," he said, pocketing my lifeline. "Why don't you go lie down? You look exhausted." I went to the bedroom, but I did not lie down. I went into the walk-in closet and pulled out the cheap prepaid smartphone I had bought with cash during my lunch break. I hid under the heavy winter coats and connected to the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi. I searched for public property records and lien filings. I typed in my name. The results that scrolled down the tiny screen made my blood run cold. There were 3 limited liability companies registered in my name that I had never heard of. Each one was leveraged to the hilt. I was the personal guarantor for loans totaling $4 million. He was not just cheating on me. He was using my identity as a trash can for his toxic debt. A murmur of voices from the study down the hall caught my attention. I crept out of the closet, moving silently across the plush carpet. The door to Julian's office was cracked open just an inch. "She is getting worse, Tom," Julian was saying into his phone. "She is paranoid. She is hallucinating. Yes. I think it is time to discuss a medical power of attorney. If she is deemed incapacitated, I need to be able to manage the assets to pay off her debts. We need to expedite the conservatorship papers." I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. He was going to have me committed. He was going to paint me as the crazy wife with the bad genes, lock me away in a facility, and legally steal everything while saddling me with his financial ruin. I retreated to the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. The terror that had been gripping me for the last 24 hours began to harden. It cooled into something sharp and heavy in my gut. He thought he was dealing with Elena the socialite, the interior designer who worried about color palettes. He had forgotten that before I was Elena Sterling. I was Elena Vance from the coal country. I washed my face with cold water. I would not run. I would not scream. I was going to burn his entire world to the ground, and I would use the ashes to bury him. As I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the bathroom window, a ghost from my past began to take shape over my shoulder. It was not a ghost of the dead, but of the living. I thought of Martha Iron Vance. To the world, she was a footnote in the violent history of the Appalachian transport unions, a woman who had allegedly organized strikes that shut down the entire eastern seaboard in the 70s. To me, she was Grandma. I had spent the last 5 years scrubbing the coal dust from my soul to fit into Julian's sterile, white-collar world. I had stopped calling home. I had changed my accent. I had become Elena Sterling, the perfect accessory. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I realized now that you do not survive a wolf like Julian by being a sheep. You survive by bringing a bigger wolf. I went to the kitchen and pulled down the tattered copy of a cookbook my mother had given me. I flipped to the back cover. Taped there, yellowed with age, was a business card. It had no name, just a black silhouette of an eagle and a phone number. I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the shower to create white noise. It was 3 a.m. I dialed the number on the prepaid phone. It rang once. "I was wondering when you were finally going to call." "Ellie," a voice rasped on the other end. It was rough, like gravel in a blender, but sharp as a razor. "Grandma, I think I'm in trouble," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Julian, he isn't who he says he is." "I know exactly who he is," Martha replied, her tone devoid of surprise. "Julian Sterling, born Julius Stant. A grifter who targets women with quiet inheritances and loud insecurities. I have had eyes on him since you brought him home for Thanksgiving 4 years ago. I told you then his smile didn't reach his eyes. He's trying to have me committed. Grandma, he wants to take everything." "Not if we take him first," she said. "Meet me at the Galaxy Diner on Route 9 at noon. It is a dump. He would not be caught dead there, and his cameras cannot see through grease." Getting out of the house was the first test. Julian had suggested I stay home to rest, which meant his security team was watching the lobby. I told the doorman I was going to the mall to buy a dress for the upcoming gala. At the mall, I went into the ladies' room on the 2nd floor. A woman in a gray maintenance uniform was waiting in the last stall. She was one of Martha's people. Wordlessly, we swapped clothes. I pulled a gray cap low over my eyes, pushed a cleaning cart out the service exit, and walked right past Julian's private security detail. The Galaxy Diner smelled of burnt coffee and stale cigarettes. In the back booth sat a woman who looked nothing like a grandmother. Martha Vance was 80 years old, but she sat with the posture of a 4-star general. She wore a tailored black suit that looked expensive but severe, and her silver hair was pulled back into a tight knot. I slid into the booth opposite her. I wanted to cry, to hug her, but one look at her steel gray eyes told me this was a war room, not a reunion. "Dry your eyes, Ellie," she commanded softly. "Tears are for the funeral. We are not there yet." She slid a thick manila folder across the sticky table. "Read it," she said. I opened the file. Inside were mugshots and newspaper clippings. There were 3 women before me. Sarah, imprisoned for embezzlement she did not commit. Veronica, committed to a state asylum for paranoid schizophrenia. Linda, suicide. Or so the report says. Martha recited the list like a menu. He follows the same script. He isolates them, makes them doubt their sanity, steals their assets, and discards the shell. I looked up, bile rising in my throat. He plans to do the same to me. He plans to, Martha corrected, leaning forward. Her hand, covered in liver spots but strong as iron, covered mine. But he made a fatal error. He forgot to check who your family is. He thinks you are alone. He thinks you are weak. I feel weak, I admitted. Then borrow my strength until you find yours. She said, "Here is the plan. I have a team of forensic accountants and heavy hitters standing by. But we cannot just hit him. We have to destroy him. We need proof of where he is hiding the money and the fake medical records. You are going back inside." "I can't go back there," I said, panic flaring. "He is watching my every move." "You are the mole, Ellie," Martha said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You go back. You play the scared, confused little wife. You let him think he has won. And while he is busy counting his victory money, you will open the doors for us. I provide the muscle and the lawyers. You provide the access. Can you do that?" I looked at the photos of the ruined women in the folder. Then I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had faced down armed strikebreakers with a tire iron. I took a deep breath. "I can do it," I said. "Good," Martha said, signaling the waitress for the check. "Because the Vance family does not get mad, we get even." I slipped back into the penthouse just as the sun was dipping below the skyline, casting long, bruised shadows across the living room. I had spent the last hour in the elevator lobby rubbing my eyes until they were red and raw, perfecting the mask of a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. When Julian greeted me, I flinched, playing the part of the fragile wife exactly as he had written it. "I just need to rest," I whispered, avoiding his gaze. "Of course, darling," he said, his voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet concern. "You rest. I will handle everything." The next morning, the cavalry arrived in the form of a scruffy-looking air conditioning repairman. He was young, maybe 22, with grease under his fingernails and a tool belt that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. This was Martha's specialist. While Julian was on a conference call in his study, the boy moved through the house with the silent precision of a cat. He didn't speak to me. He simply pointed to the smoke detector, the lamp base, and the thermostat, tapping his ear to indicate audio bugs. Then he handed me a small, innocuous tin of modeling wax and jerked his head toward Julian's office. He held up 5 fingers. I had 5 minutes while he looped the security feed. The opportunity to use the wax came that night. Julian was celebrating a victory at work, which meant a bottle of single malt scotch. By midnight, he was passed out on the Italian leather sofa, his arm dangling off the side. The room smelled of expensive alcohol and the dying embers of the fireplace. I knelt beside him, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I softened a ball of the modeling wax in my palm until it was pliable. I reached for his right hand. His skin was warm and his breathing was heavy and wet. "Julian," I whispered, testing him. He didn't stir. I pressed the wax against his thumb, rolling it gently to capture the print. Suddenly, He snorted and shifted his weight. Harper, he mumbled in his sleep. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I held my breath until my lungs burned. He settled back into the cushions, his head lolling to the side. I peeled the wax away. It was perfect. The next day, as soon as Julian left for the office, I was in his study. I used the mold to bypass the biometric scanner on his wall safe. The mechanism whirred and clicked open. What I found inside made my knees weak. I expected cash or passports. Instead, I found a black velvet pouch. I tipped it out onto the desk. 5 platinum rings spilled out, identical to the one I had found under Harper's sink. He had bought them in bulk. Our marriage, our anniversary, it was all just inventory to him. I dug deeper. There was a ledger recording monthly payments of $3,000 to Harper Evans labeled as consulting fees. She wasn't just scared, she was being paid to keep quiet, likely coerced into taking the money to keep her nursing license. Beneath that lay a thick medical file with my name on it. It was a petition for involuntary commitment, citing severe paranoia and hallucinations, already signed by a Dr. Eris Thorne, a man I had never met. The front door slammed shut. "Elena! I forgot my tablet!" Julian's voice echoed from the hallway. He was home early. Panic surged through me, electric and sharp. I shoved the rings and papers back into the safe and slammed the heavy steel door. It locked with a mechanical thud just as the doorknob to the study turned. I dropped to the floor by the bookshelf, pulling out a bottle of herbal sleep aids I kept there for emergencies. When Julian walked in, I was sitting on the carpet, clutching the bottle, shaking uncontrollably. "Elena." He stopped, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. "What are you doing in here?" I looked up at him, letting a tear spill over. I couldn't find my anxiety pills. I thought I left them in here. I can't stop shaking. Julian, I feel like I am going crazy." The suspicion in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a triumphant gleam. He walked over and helped me up, taking the bottle from my hand. "Shh, it is okay," he soothed, stroking my hair. "You are just stressed, but I have good news. I cleared my schedule. This weekend, I am taking you to the cabin at Blackwood Ridge. Just the 2 of us. No phones, no distractions. We will get you fixed." I buried my face in his chest to hide the cold fury in my eyes. "That sounds wonderful," I said. He thought he was taking a lamb to the slaughter. He didn't know he was inviting the wolf into the woods. I texted Harper a location that Julian's GPS trackers would never flag, a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor, located 3 towns over, nestled between a muffler shop and a condemned warehouse. The air inside smelled of stale beer and regret. When Harper walked in, she looked like a ghost haunting her own life. She wore dark sunglasses and a trench coat that seemed too big for her shrinking frame. She slid into the booth opposite me, her hands trembling so violently that the ice in her water glass clinked against the sides. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out the heavy platinum ring, and slammed it onto the scarred wood of the table. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Or I walk out of here and let Julian destroy whatever is left of you." Harper stared at the ring, and then she broke. It wasn't a quiet cry, it was a dam bursting. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders heaving. "I didn't sleep with him. Elena, I swear. I swear on my mother's grave." Harper sobbed, her voice cracking. "He set me up. He invited me over for a consultation about his mother's home care, and then he drugged my coffee. When I woke up, he showed me a video. It was staged. It looked like we were intimate. He said if I didn't do exactly what he said, he would send it to the nursing board and have my license revoked for unethical conduct." I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. "The ring. Why was it under your sink?" "He put it there," Harper whispered, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "He told me he left it there on purpose. He wanted you to find it. He said, He said he wanted to see if you were smart enough to catch him, or if you were just another dumb trust fund baby. He told me if I warned you, he would release the video. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just cheating, he was orchestrating a psychological torture chamber. It is worse than the blackmail. Elena, Harper continued, leaning in, her eyes wide with terror. He isn't just hiding assets. He is using your name as the signatory for a shell company that imports unapproved chemical compounds. They are running off-book trials for a new drug. The side effects? People are dying. Elena, and on paper, you are the one killing them. I grabbed her hand. Come with me. Now. I drove us to the safe house Martha had set up in an old brownstone in the city. When we walked in, my grandmother was sitting at a dining table covered in monitors and blueprints. She didn't look surprised to see Harper. Harper handed over a flash drive she had been hiding in her bra. Here. This is everything. The shipping manifests, the patient logs, the emails where he discusses the disposal of the bodies. Martha plugged the drive into a laptop. Her team of forensic accountants began to swarm over the data. After 10 minutes of tense silence, the lead accountant looked up. "It is confirmed," he said. "He is liquidating everything, the real estate, the stocks, the offshore holdings. He is consolidating it all into a single account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer is scheduled to execute this coming Monday morning." "That gives us 48 hours, Martha said, her voice hard as flint. "If we just turn him in now, he uses his lawyers to delay and the money disappears. He flees the country and leaves Elena holding the bag for the manslaughter charges." "So we have to break him," I said. "We have to bankrupt him," Martha corrected. "We are going to redirect that transfer, but to do that, we need his biometric authorization key, which he keeps on his person at all times, and we need you to keep him distracted. The weekend trip," I realized. "The cabin." "Exactly," Martha said. She reached into a small metal case and pulled out a pair of hiking boots that looked exactly like mine. "The heel of the left boot contains a military-grade GPS tracker. And this," she handed me a pearl button. "Sew this onto your cardigan. It is a high-fidelity listening device. We will be right behind you." The reality of what I had to do settled over me. I had to go into the woods with a man who viewed me as livestock to be slaughtered, and I had to smile while he sharpened the knife. I turned to Harper. She was still shaking, looking at the floor. I took her chin in my hand and forced her to look at me. "Stop shaking," I commanded. "He wanted us to be enemies. He wanted us to be weak. But he forgot one thing." "What?" Harper asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We are not victims," I said, feeling the steel of my grandmother's legacy stiffen my spine. "We are hunters." The drive up the winding mountain road felt less like a romantic getaway and more like a funeral procession. The trees grew thicker with every mile, blotting out the sun until the road became a tunnel of gray shadows. Julian drove with one hand on the wheel, talking incessantly about our future and how this break would heal our marriage. But every time he glanced at me, his eyes were devoid of warmth. They were the eyes of an appraiser looking for cracks in a vase, calculating exactly how much pressure it would take to shatter me completely. The cabin was a beautiful structure of timber and glass perched on the edge of a ravine. But as soon as we stepped inside, the silence of the woods swallowed us whole. I checked my phone immediately. No service. I watched Julian lock the heavy front door, then the back. He slipped the ring of keys into his pocket with a casualness that chilled me to the bone. He was no longer a husband, he was a warden, and I was the inmate in a prison of his design. "Drink up, darling," Julian urged, pushing a glass of dark red wine toward me as we sat by the fire. "It will help you relax." Beside the wine lay a stack of legal documents. "Just standard power of attorney forms," he explained, his voice smooth and coaxing. "Since you have been so unwell lately, I need to be able to handle the bills in the estate without bothering you. It is for your own protection, Elena. I lifted the glass to my lips, letting the liquid touch my tongue, then pretended to cough violently. I spat the wine back into my handkerchief while he turned to stoke the fire. My hand trembled not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I took the pen. I signed Elena Vane instead of Vance, dragging the tail of the last letter so it looked messy but legible enough to pass a casual glance, yet distinct enough for a bank to flag it as a forgery later. Julian smiled as he collected the papers, satisfied that his trap had sprung. Later that night, the floorboards creaked. I feigned sleep on the sofa as Julian moved to the kitchen. Through the thin walls, I heard him speaking Russian on a satellite phone. I did not speak the language, but then he switched to English, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Do not worry," he said. "The cash cow has been milked. She is finished. I will have full control by Monday morning." I waited until the house was silent, then crept out the side door he had neglected to bolt. I ran to the car, hoping to hotwire it if I had to. My heart sank. All 4 tires were slashed. The rubber flayed open like dead fish. He never intended for us to leave this weekend. He intended for me to have an accident, or perhaps disappear into the ravine. I rushed back inside, desperate to find the satellite phone he kept in his emergency kit. I was digging through his leather bag when the lights snapped on. Julian stood in the doorway, his face contorted into a mask of pure rage. He grabbed a crystal vase from the table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered inches from my head, raining glass onto my hair. "You snooping little," he snarled, stepping closer, his hands balling into fists. "I try to help you, and this is how you repay me. Maybe the basement is the only place you will be safe from yourself." He lunged for me. I had to pivot. I had to confuse him. I saw the transfer. I screamed, feigning the hysteria of a jealous wife. I saw the money go to Blue Horizon. "Who is she? Julian? Is she your mistress? Is that why you are doing this?" The specific name hit him like a physical blow. He froze. He didn't think I knew about the shell company. Confusion warred with his anger. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of a leak in his organization. "Who told you that name?" he demanded, his eyes darting around the room as if the walls had ears. "Stay here," he hissed, shoving me onto the sofa. "Do not move." He grabbed a flashlight and went outside. Paranoid now, checking the perimeter for spies or listeners. The second the door closed, I reached for my left boot. I pressed the heel hard against the floorboards 3 times, activating the distress beacon my grandmother had installed. Julian returned moments later, locking the door behind him. The murderous look was back, sharper than before. "Change of plans," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "We are leaving at first light, if you want to act crazy. Elena, I will take you to a place where screaming is the only language they speak. You are going into the facility tomorrow morning." The sun had not yet crested the horizon when Julian dragged me out of the cabin, his grip on my upper arm bruisingly tight. He threw me into the passenger seat of the car and slammed the door, locking it instantly. We tore down the mountain road at 80 miles an hour, the tires screaming in protest against the asphalt as he took the curves with reckless aggression. For the first hour, the only sound was the roar of the engine and Julian's manic voice. He was rehearsing the play he had written for us, directing a scene that hadn't happened yet. "It is going to be tragic, Elena," he said, glancing at me with a twisted smile. "You are going to storm into the board meeting. You will be screaming about conspiracies and fake companies. You will look unhinged. Security will have to restrain you. It will be the final nail in the coffin for your competency hearing. I will look like the grieving husband who tried everything to save you." I did not answer him. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. I was not looking at the road. I was watching the reflection in the side mirror. counting down the seconds based on the GPS coordinates I had memorized. "Are you listening to me?" he snapped, pounding the steering wheel. "You are quiet now, but you will scream later. Everyone screams eventually." We pulled into a dilapidated gas station off the main highway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering against the gray morning sky. Julian killed the engine. "I need water," he muttered, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Do not even think about trying to open that door." He got out, engaging the child locks before slamming the door shut. He walked toward the convenience store, his stride arrogant and assured. He thought he had won. Suddenly, the ground beneath the car vibrated. A massive 18-wheeler, its chrome grille gleaming like the teeth of a predator, roared out from behind the station building. With a screech of air brakes, it jackknifed directly in front of Julian's car, blocking the exit completely. Julian froze. He reached into his jacket, his hand diving for the illegal pistol he kept in his shoulder holster. "Get back!" he shouted at the truck. Before he could draw the weapon, 2 doors on the truck cab flew open. 2 men, built like mountains and wearing the dark blue windbreakers of the transport union, dropped to the pavement. They moved with surprising speed. Before Julian could disengage the safety, one of them twisted his arm behind his back with a sickening crunch while the other kicked the gun across the asphalt. "Let me go!" Julian screamed, struggling uselessly against their grip. "Do you know who I am? I will sue you. I will have you killed." A black Cadillac sedan rolled slowly around the side of the truck. The rear window glided down. The door opened, and Martha Vance stepped out. She did not look like an old woman. She looked like a judge arriving to deliver a verdict. She walked up to Julian, who was pinned against the hood of his own car, panting and terrified. She did not speak immediately. She looked him up and down with an expression of profound disgust. Then she pulled her hand back and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked through the morning air like a gunshot. Julian's head snapped to the side, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his lip. "You!" Julian gasped, his eyes widening as he recognized her. "You are the grandmother, the dead one." "I am very much alive, boy," Martha said, her voice low and steady. "And you have made a mess of my granddaughter's life." The union men tightened their grip, ready to break him right there, but Martha held up a hand. "Let him go," she commanded. The men hesitated, then released him. Julian stumbled back, clutching his bruised arm, looking between the men and the old woman in confusion. "What?" he stammered. "You are letting me go." "The stage is set, Julian," Martha said, dusting off her hands. "The actors are in place. The audience is waiting. A leading man should never be late for his own finale. Go, run to your glass tower." She stepped back into the Cadillac. Julian stood there for a moment, his arrogance warring with his fear. He looked at the gun lying in the dirt, then at the massive men blocking it. He made the calculation of a coward. He scrambled back into his car, started the engine, and reversed wildly, screeching around the truck and speeding back onto the highway toward the city. He thought he had escaped a random encounter with my family. He had no idea he was running directly into the slaughterhouse. I opened the door of his car, which he had unlocked in his panic, and walked calmly over to the Cadillac. I slid into the back seat next to Martha. On the seat lay a garment bag containing a tailored white suit, sharp, pristine, and powerful. "Did he hurt you?" Martha asked, her eyes scanning my face. "No," I said, reaching for the suit. "But he is going to wish he had." "Get changed," Martha said, tapping the driver on the shoulder to start the car. "We have a board meeting to crash." While Julian was speeding down the interstate, tearing up the asphalt to get back to the sanctuary of his office, the real war was being fought in the cloud. I sat in the back of the Cadillac, watching a tablet screen as Martha's team of forensic accountants sliced through Sterling Bio's firewalls like a hot knife through butter. "We are in," the lead hacker said from the front seat, his fingers flying across a portable keyboard. "The transfer window is open." Julian had set up a routing number for a shell bank in the Cayman Islands to receive $75 million of embezzled company funds at 9 o'clock sharp. With a few keystrokes, that river of dirty money was diverted. It did not go to the Caribbean. It was split into 3 equal donations to mental health charities established in the names of Sarah, Veronica, and Linda, the women he had destroyed before me. Simultaneously, a packet of digital evidence hit the secure servers of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI. It contained the loan documents with my forged signature and the time-stamped metadata proving I was miles away when they were signed. We arrived at the Sterling Bio headquarters just as the transfer confirmation blinked green on the hacker's screen. Harper was already there, waiting in the lobby with a security team we had hired. She looked pale, but she stood her ground, clutching a folder of patient records that would bury Julian's medical license forever. I pulled up the live feed from the boardroom security camera on my tablet. Julian was standing at the head of the massive mahogany table. He looked disheveled, his tie crooked, but he was commanding the room with the desperate energy of a man fighting for his life. The 12 members of the board looked on with grave concern. "I did not want to bring this to you," Julian was saying, his voice breaking with practiced sorrow. "But my wife, Elena, is unwell. Her paranoia has spiraled into dangerous sabotage. She has been making wild accusations about embezzlement and conspiracies." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a platinum ring. It was one of the duplicates I had seen in his safe, identical to the one I had found under Harper's sink. He held it up to the light, letting it catch the glare of the chandelier. "She accused me of hiding this." He lied smoothly. "She claimed I planted it to torment her, but here it is. I had it polished for our anniversary. She is hallucinating. Ladies and gentlemen, she is seeing enemies where there is only love. I have no choice but to ask for an emergency suspension of her voting rights as a shareholder until she can be institutionalized." The board members murmured in agreement. They were buying it. They saw a heartbroken husband, not a sociopath. The chairman reached for the gavel to call the vote. Outside, the scene was silent but heavy. The black Cadillac glided to a stop at the curb. Behind us, 3 unmarked government SUVs pulled up, blocking the exits. Agents in windbreakers stepped out, their badges flashing in the morning sun. They did not rush in. They waited for the signal. I stepped out of the car. I smoothed the lapels of the white suit Martha had given me. It was sharp and architectural, a suit of armor made of silk and wool. In my hand, I carried a black velvet jewelry box. I walked past the stunned receptionist and swiped my access card for the private elevator. As the door slid shut, enclosing me in silence, I watched the floor numbers climb. Floor 30, floor 40, floor 50. I took a deep breath. I was not nervous. The girl who cried in the bathroom was gone. The woman in the elevator was about to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The doors chimed softly, signaling my arrival. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the boardroom just as Julian was dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief. He was putting on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. His shoulders slumped in feigned defeat. When he saw me standing there in my white suit, alive and free, the handkerchief dropped from his hand. His face transformed instantly from tragic to terrified. "She escaped!" Julian shouted, jumping up from his leather chair and pointing a shaking finger at me. "Call security. She is dangerous. She escaped the mental facility. Someone grab her." The 12 board members looked at me, then back at him. Not a single person moved. The security guards standing by the walls remained statuesque, their arms crossed. They worked for the building, but today, they answered to the federal badge my grandmother had shown them downstairs. I did not scream. I did not cry. I walked calmly to the head of the table, pulled a connector cable from the audio-visual console, and plugged it into my phone. "What are you doing?" Julian hissed, his eyes wide and manic. "Get away from there!" I hit play. Julian's voice, amplified by the room's surround sound system, boomed off the walls. It was the recording from the cabin, crystal clear and damning. "The cash cow has been milked. She is finished. I will have full control by Monday morning." The color drained from the faces of the board members. The chairman looked at Julian with open horror. Julian stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land, unable to find a lie big enough to cover the truth. Then, the doors opened again. The rhythmic thump of a heavy cane heralded her arrival. Martha Vance walked in. She was not a sweet old lady. She was a monolith in a black suit, radiating an authority that made the air in the room feel heavy. "Sit down, boy," Martha said. It was not a suggestion. Behind her walked Special Agent Miller, a man with a jaw like an anvil. He stepped past Martha and placed a heavy hand on Julian's shoulder. "Julian Sterling," Miller announced, his voice filling the room. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and the trafficking of unapproved pharmaceuticals." "No," Julian shrieked, batting the agent's hand away like a petulant child. "This is a setup. It was her. Look at the papers. The shell companies are in her name. She is the one doing it. She is the criminal. I am the victim here." "I was coerced," a voice said from the doorway. Julian whipped around. Harper stepped into the light. She looked pale, but she stood tall, clutching a thick file to her chest. "He blackmailed me," Harper said to the room, locking eyes with Julian. "He threatened to destroy my nursing career and my life if I didn't help him frame his wife. I have turned over all the original files and the blackmail videos." Julian looked cornered. He was sweating profusely now, his eyes darting for an exit that didn't exist. "You are all lying. None of this proves anything about the ring. She is paranoid. She invented the affair to ruin me." I stepped forward. I held up the black velvet bag I had taken from his safe. "You are right, Julian," I said softly. "I did find a ring, but then I looked in your safe." I upended the bag over the polished mahogany table. Clatter, clink, clatter. 5 identical platinum rings bounced and spun across the wood, the metal singing a harsh song as they settled in a damning heap right in front of the chairman. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a carefully constructed life shattering into a million pieces. I leaned in close to Julian. I wanted him to smell the perfume he had bought me, the scent of the woman he thought he could erase. "You said you were fixing her shower," I said, my voice ice cold. "Oh, but you were just trying to fix the truth, and you failed." "You," Julian gasped, his face turning a blotchy purple as the realization hit him. "You bit." "Cuff him," Agent Miller ordered. The metal clicked around Julian's wrists. As they dragged him out of the room, the facade completely crumbled. He began to scream, a high-pitched, animalistic sound of pure desperation that echoed down the hallway. "I am Julian Sterling," he howled as they hauled him toward the elevator. "I own this city. You can't touch me. I am the victim, Elena." Elena. I watched him go without blinking, down in the lobby. The press was waiting. Martha had tipped them off an hour ago. He was about to have his close-up, but for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be the one controlling the narrative. The fall of the Sterling bio-empire was not a slow decline. It was a demolition. For weeks, the news cycle was dominated by images of Julian being led out of the courthouse in shackles, his once pristine suit rumored and his face a mask of defeat. The jury did not hesitate. Faced with the mountain of evidence provided by my grandmother's team and Harper's testimony, Julian was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He would die in a concrete box, stripped of his name, his money, and his power. My exoneration was swift and absolute, thanks to the metadata from the GPS tracker in my boot and the cooperation of the FBI. Every fraudulent loan and fake medical document was traced back to Julian. I walked out of the federal building not as a suspect, but as a survivor. In the weeks that followed, my phone began to ring. It was not reporters, but the women who came before me. Sarah called from a halfway house in Ohio, weeping with relief that her name was finally cleared. Veronica sent a letter from the facility where she had been wrongly held for 3 years, thanking me for giving her life back. We formed a quiet, unbreakable sisterhood, bound by the scars of the same war. Harper and I sat on the hood of her car one last time before she left the city. She looked healthier, the dark circles under her eyes replaced by a spark of hope. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, handing her a check to help start her new life. "I have never been more sure. Elena," she smiled, squeezing my hand. "A free clinic in the countryside. No cameras, no blackmail, just healing. I think it is time I fixed myself too." We hugged, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of betrayal between us. Grandma Martha decided to officially retire, for real this time. She summoned me to her study, where the air always smelled of old paper and peppermint. She slid a set of heavy keys across the desk. They were for the vintage Cadillac. Along with the keys came the access codes to the Vance family trust, the clean money, washed of its coal dust origins and ready to build something new. "You have the iron Ellie," she said, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Now go find your ivy. Grow something beautiful over the ruins." I took her advice. I sold the penthouse. I couldn't bear to live within those glass walls anymore. With the proceeds, I established the Phoenix Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to women trapped in economic abuse. I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the penthouse one last time. The sun glared off the windows, but I felt no nostalgia, only a profound sense of lightness. The title of millionaire's wife had been a heavy coat I was forced to wear. Now, I was just Elena. I didn't return to Arcos Design. Instead, I leased a small, bright studio in the Arts District. I painted the name on the glass door myself, Iron and Ivy. It was a tribute to the woman who saved me and the woman I had become. We would design spaces that were beautiful, yes, but also strong, structures that could weather any storm. The final chapter of my old life ended on a stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway. I drove the Cadillac with the top down, the salty wind whipping through my hair. The engine purred beneath me, a powerful beast that obeyed my command. To my right, the ocean stretched out to infinity, a vast expanse of blue crashing against the rocks. I pulled over at a scenic overlook. The sun was beginning to set, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the one thing I had kept. It was the real platinum ring, the one Julian had actually given me 5 years ago. It felt heavy in my hand, dense with memories of lies and manipulation. I walked to the edge of the cliff. "Goodbye, Julian," I whispered to the wind. I threw it. The ring caught the sunlight one last time, a tiny spark falling through the air, before it vanished into the churning white foam of the waves below. It was gone. The ocean swallowed it whole, burying my past in the deep, cold dark. I turned back to the car, climbed into the driver's seat, and put it in gear. The road ahead was long and winding, but for the first time in my life, I was the one driving. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.